Welcome! Welcome to my first video, not for Patreon. This is for whoever wants to watch this. I did have a Patreon. I decided to cancel it, to unlaunch it, whatever, and then just make all of my YouTube videos public so that they would reach more people who could potentially benefit from my insight as a board game designer, who might enjoy them, just to reach a larger audience, and then maybe one day get YouTube to pay me instead of my patrons. That would be ideal. But here we are. So my first video, my first public video, I will be making all of my Patreon videos that I did already. I'll make those all public. But this is my first one for you, all of you. And I decided to make it about 5 mistakes that pretty much every new board game designer makes. I definitely have done these and I still sometimes struggle with them. And so they're just good things to be aware of. You all, like this word mistake, you always learn something from these things. They're just good to be aware of and to not invest too much time or like waste too much time or energy into these things. So let's just get right into it. So the first one I wrote down is focusing on one game for too long. I definitely did this. The first game that I took like seriously, that I was like, okay, I'm gonna self-publish this. I'm going to make this my first actual game. I ended up not self-publishing. I'll probably do a video about that. I spent a couple years on this. It's pretty much the only game I worked on during that time. And I know a lot of people who do this. I've been to conventions where someone will bring the same game every year. And I, as a designer, and pretty much any designer will say this, that you will become a better designer the more games that you make. So if you're just focusing on your one, you think this is going to be my game. One day a publisher is going to pick this up, or one day I'm going to self-publish it or whatever. You're limiting yourself and you're denying yourself opportunity to grow and to try new things and to try different genres, try different games, becoming a better designer. So if you're just focusing on one game, I would definitely suggest taking a break from it, trying a completely new game, try to make a completely new game, and just in general, having at least a couple games on the go. If you only have one game that you're working on at a time, that has all your focus on just that one game. And I can guarantee you that the first game that you think of will not be your best game. And just focusing on one game and trying to like make it the best game possible, you're going to burn out. It's not a good approach to it. I would definitely suggest having a few games on the go at a time. This will give you fresh eyes for that game that you really think that something is there, because there definitely could be something there. But if you are so in the weeds on it, it's not going to give you that perspective that you might need. And the second mistake that most new designers make, and I definitely did this, is testing your games only with friends and family. They are absolutely amazing playtesters to have in general. And continue to test games with them. They're available, it's fun, they're usually your target market, all those sorts of things. So they're definitely a good group to have. But if they're your only group, I guarantee you won't be getting the breadth of feedback that you deserve and that your game deserves. If you play with people who are not your friends or family, who don't have aren't worried about being 100% honest, they shouldn't be jerks about it, but I guarantee you're going to get more honest feedback from people not related to you or who aren't close friends. And so it's good to get all different kinds of perspectives. And especially if you test with other designers, you will learn a lot. I pretty much guarantee you, they'll tell you, well, this game reminds me of this game. Have you heard of this game? Have you heard of this game? And then you can go play those games and learn about how maybe your game is similar, how it might be different. You could even discover that, oh, my game already exists. So that's good to know. Move on to something else. Or change it and improve on it, make it different. But these are things that you might not know if you don't test with designers or people in the board game community who have that sort of insight. The third mistake that most new board game designers make is spending too much time and money on how a game looks rather than how it plays. And this is super important. I was at a convention a few years ago, and this person had a game there, and it had professional art, professional graphics, professionally printed. It looked great, and it was a roll and move, and it was not a very good roll and move at that. So you almost can't give feedback to someone who has obviously invested a lot of money into this game. It was not a good game. That's something to definitely be aware of. You want to be spending as little amount of money as possible on your prototypes while you're still playtesting them. They're not a final product. And especially if you are planning on pitching to publishers, don't spend any money on art. Don't spend any money on graphics. The publishers are going to be changing that anyway. Almost 100% of the time, they're not going to be keeping your art. Just use clip art, just make something quick yourself, placeholder art, because publishers will be changing that. If you're going to be self-publishing, only spend money on your art and graphics on your final product. When you're playtesting, it should just be what's called a minimum viable product. So it just needs to play, and it needs to communicate the rules and the gameplay, but don't worry too much about how it looks. With that said, I know a lot of people, myself included, I enjoy that sort of artistic, creative part of the prototyping process. So here's an example of a game that I'm working on at the moment. This is the first board that I made for this game. I hadn't even play tested it yet. So I do understand that this is definitely probably too much time put into this prototype, but you know what? I enjoy kind of doing arts and crafts. So it's just something that I am aware of. The whole time I was doing it, I was like, okay, we don't need to go into too much detail. You know, it's about balance. But there are other designers like me, like Erica Hayes-Beveris. She's a great designer. She spoke one time at a convention about how the way that her brain works and a lot of people's brains work is that spending time on the prototype and getting that creativity and that artistic side out actually helps with the prototyping part, and it's just how some people like to do it. So I definitely enjoy, making prototypes and drawing and coloring them and all that. This definitely didn't need all this detail, but it's definitely way less than I would have done years ago. So what I like to do now is give myself a time limit. So you have 1 hour to put this prototype together, and just give yourself a limit. And what's also helpful too is actually if you book a playtesting session. So if you RSVP to a meetup or you sign up for a convention, so you have a deadline for when you will be playtesting your game. So then you can't be spending weeks and months making your prototype look pretty. You just have to get something done and get it to the table. That actually leads right into number 4, which is not getting your game to the table fast enough. Not getting your game in front of other people to actually play soon enough. So the designer Sen-Foong Lim, he talks a lot about this, about how he used to do this, and I did this, and I still do this sometimes, where you try to almost think a game to perfection. You're like, if I just think about it hard enough, if I just visualize all the possible scenarios, I can just fix them in my brain, and I can make the prototype perfect, and it'll be final and won't even need to be tested. But that's just not how it works. Once you get your game in front of other people, I guarantee you it will go completely different than what you had in your mind. So getting something to the table as soon as possible will save you so much time and energy than thinking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks, trying to make it perfect in your mind. And part of the reason that we don't want to put our games in front of other people sometimes is because we're you know, it's a scary thing to put your game out for other people to critique, especially if you haven't done it before. It's a, you know, it's a vulnerable thing to do, and it's scary. And I totally get that. So separating yourself from your game is a good thing to do. Just know that when people are critiquing your game, they're not critiquing you. They're just critiquing this game that you've made. And I know it's hard to separate the two. But once you've gone through a few playtesting sessions, it gets easier, and you definitely get a tougher skin, thicker skin, and it becomes a way less scary thing. Because the only way that your game is going to improve is if you get it in front of other people. And so the fifth thing that I'm going to be talking about today is when new designers, and you know, even experienced designers do this as well, is being defensive or ignoring feedback that comes up in playtesting sessions repeatedly. So if certain feedback comes up more than once, that's definitely something to look at, and to listen to, and to possibly explore. You can always try it out, and if it didn't work, that's fine. So what I do is I take in all feedback during a playtesting session, and I write it all down. And then after I reflect on it, I read over my notes, and then I decide what I want to implement and what I'm going to not implement. That's up to you to decide. But it's definitely good to be open and listen, and not defend the game when people are giving their feedback. When they say, well, this was a bit frustrating for me because this and that, this and that. And you say, oh, well, if you had done this and that, then you shouldn't have been frustrating. That's not helpful, and that's not helpful for your game. So just listen to people, don't be defensive, and you get to decide if you're even going to implement it or not. All right, so that's it for my first public non-Patreon video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions for future videos you would like to, like different topics you would like me to talk about, let me know in the comments. Hopefully this was helpful to you, and hopefully this will help you save some time and energy and money by just being aware of these things. And even if you do these things, you know, you always learn from them. So it's not a bad thing to do any of these things. It's just things to be aware of. All right, so be sure to subscribe and follow me on Instagram and Twitter at PartyHackGames. I actually posted this question on Twitter, and I got some really good answers from other designers about some mistakes that they made when they first started out, so check that out. And thanks for watching. Bye!